This is my father, Kenneth Thomas Hinton's gravesite. He was an Air Force pilot, and he was died in an air crash in 1946, the year I was born, so I never knew my dad. Then next to my dad is my mom. That's Pauline Featherling Land, Hinton Land. She died in 1991, and we all loved her and missed her very much. Next to Pauline is Neil Land. This was my stepdad, and he died in 1966. In 2001, my brother died very suddenly, Steve Land, and he's buried next to his father. And then the Featherlings, as we go back over here, these were my mother's grandparents. Grandparents. It was Sydney and Elizabeth, I believe, and then Minnie and Charles. And Minnie and Charles' parents were my mother's parents. Their children were my mother's parents, and they are behind me. This is 352 Woodlawn Loop. This is where I lived with my mother, my stepdad, and my two brothers and a sister. I call it the adoption home because I really didn't want to live here. I wanted to live with Mama Two and Papa Pete. But this is where I grew up. This is where I spent my teenage years. That's where the boys sat up there on the porch. The porch light that went on to my mom tell me to come inside. It looks so much smaller now than it did then, but this is the house I grew up in. This is the house I moved away from to become married. This is the back of 352 Woodlawn Loop, and this is the ditch that we played in. And it was full of foliage and trees and vines, and there was always water running through it. It was kind of like a little forest to us. We had a fort built down here. We could go 3 feet away and somebody wouldn't see us. We could hide. There was that much water. We caught, well, I guess they were crawfish. I don't know what they were. Mud bugs in there. And we didn't eat them, but we caught them. My brother swears he caught fish down there, which I don't think that happened. But anyway, this is where we played, and this is the alleyway where they came behind the house to pick up the trash. This is Kay Grant's house. She was my best friend, and we used to call Billy Higginbotham, who lived across the street, and tell him that we were out at the Circle K, which is a park, and we were having a party and wanted him to come on out. He would get dressed up, he would get his mother to take him out there, and of course nobody was out there. Merle Smith Junior High, or middle school as they're called now. This is where I went to middle school, and we walked from my home on Woodlawn Loop, and we all met in the cafeteria, and we hooked up with our buddies and our boyfriends and our girlfriends, and then we'd go down the hallway to our classes. The building, or the office behind me, is the office, the main office. That's where we really never wanted to go, because if we acted up, of course, you know, we get sent to the office. But this is where I took sewing lessons, or the classes, home economics, and I made an A on my apron because I snuck it out in my book bag, and my mom made it for me. And to this day, I can't sew. But we had a lot of fun here. In fact, my first year here, I was the class favorite. So that was fun, and it was very different here because I'd come out of a parochial school and all of our classes were in one classroom. But here we got to change classrooms, and we went from one classroom to another like they do now, and it was fun and I enjoyed it, and that's it. From here I went to high school. This is Sinton High School. My mother graduated from here and I graduated from here. This is the front entrance. We would walk in to go to school and go to our different classes. Cafeteria, it was in the back of the building, and then all our classrooms were around the side. This building here, that's now the administration building, was our auditorium, and that's where all the plays and actually graduation sometimes was held there. Mine was outside on the football field, but different things were held there. This building, this room right here on the end was the English classroom. I'll never forget that. Mrs. Uten was our teacher, but that's it. And that tree with the heart in it has been here forever. I guess they're keeping it alive. Looks like they got a plaque in front of it. The building behind us was the gymnasium. And the gymnasium was where all the basketball games and so forth were held. We are on Market Street, and this is where I lived until I was 11 years old with my grandmother, grandfather, my mother for a while, and then she remarried, and then later I had to live with them. And I call them Mama Two and Papa Pete, and everybody in town called them Mama Two and Papa Pete. Across the street, that's where Hannah lived. I don't remember her last name, but she was my best friend. And you see there is a fence there, and it used to enclose her backyard. And I was on one side of the fence one day, she was on the other side, and she called me a turtle head. So I picked up a brick and I threw it over the fence, and it hit her in the head. And she bled and bled, and I got in trouble. And I will never forget that. This is the home on Market Street that I grew up with Mama Two and Papa Pete. The living room was here in the front, and they bought me a piano, and I played the piano. And when my grandfather was very ill, Papa Pete, he would be in the back bedroom, and he could see through the house, the hallway, to the living room where I was playing the piano. So I played the piano for him while he was sick. There used to be a fish pond out here too, and several times some of the little kids fell in, so they covered it up. The yellow building on the other side is a garage apartment that my grandfather, Papa Pete, built for my mother and her husband and the 3 children to live in. And below were the 3 garages, and we used to play in that garage for hours when it was cold outside or something. We were always outside, always. There also was a large tree which has been cut down now that's in the driveway. And when the men would go deer hunting and they would come back with the deer, they would hang the deer in the tree. It's gross, but kids played with it too. Across the street there was Hannah, and then there was another house, maybe the yellow house, and that's where a friend of mine, Gil Edgar, lived. And we used to have corncob fights. Yeah, and we were wicked with them. We're on Facebook together. We still remember that. So this is where I grew up. The backyard. We used to have weddings in the backyard because there's a patio there, and then there was a long driveway. And we used to have weddings and probably had funerals and had corncob fights, and I got called a turtle and bonged her in the head. Then on the other side of this is where my uncle, who the whole time I lived with Mama Two and Papa Pete, he lived with us. But then when my grandparents both passed away, he sold this property and he built himself a little house. And this was his house. And he was a carpenter by trade, a custom carpenter. And he had all his machines and everything were in the back. And all that's gone now. That's his little house. All right. When I was living in Arkansas, and my grandmother had passed away, my uncle lived here for a while and couldn't afford it. He was going to rent it out, and he called me and said, all you have to do is pay the taxes. This house, this land is yours. And I said no. And I have never forgiven myself for that. And actually this is it looks small. It's a 2-story house. There's an attic upstairs with a bedroom upstairs. So anyway, of course it looked much, much bigger when I was little. But yeah, I said no, and that's one of the things I've always regretted. This white building used to be the Sinton Hospital. My mother was born in this hospital, and I was born in this hospital, and probably my brothers and sisters were born here also. My grandfather, Papa Pete, passed away in this hospital, and I have to tell you this because my sister said I did. We had a terrible car accident, and she's the only one that the ambulance took to the hospital, and this was the hospital they took her to. Obviously they didn't do a very good job. But anyway, that's all. That's the hospital that we were born in, and my mother, my grandparents probably, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, a lot of people were born there. This house right here is my stepfather's parents, Hazel and Bob Land. And we came here every Christmas Eve to have Christmas with all the children, and my grandmother always had that ribbon candy that they sell at Christmas, and she always had banana cream pies. And we would have Christmas here, then we would go to midnight mass, and then we would go to my other grandmother, Mama Too's house. The house next door was a friend of mine. Her name was, the last name was Koshin, and occasionally I could spend the night at her house, and her mother would fix breakfast for us, and there would be her mother, her father, and myself, and her mother fixed 4 pieces of bacon, scrambled 4 eggs, and 2 pieces of toast cut in half. And that's how they ate every meal. If they had chicken, they had 3 chicken legs. If I was there, I got the 4th one. This is the San Patricio County Courthouse. This is where you go pay your taxes, get your marriage license, and so forth. And this is a monument for those that served our country and who died so that we could have freedom. I'm reading that from the thing. It's all according to the different wars. There's Vietnam, Korea, and all the names of the fellas that died for us, and the girls are put there. My dad's name is here on World War II. His name is Kenneth Hinton. I don't really see it right now. Oh, there he is, Kenneth Thomas Hinton. That's my dad. He was killed right after World War II, but he was a World War II veteran. And this is the monument that they gave to him, although he was not born in Sinton and he did not come from Sinton. He was such a wonderful person that everybody that met him just loved him. He was just so warm and kind and giving. And I didn't know him. And now we have the Persian Gulf War, and I'm sure soon they'll have the, I don't know, Middle East War, whatever they call that. So, and you can see it's right across the street from my grandmother's house, Grandmother Land. And they used to have a parrot out on the video. And when the girls would go into the courthouse, that parrot whistled like a man whistling. My grandfather got in so much trouble because of that parrot, because they knew, everybody knew where the Lands lived, you know, but they thought Papa was out there whistling at the girls. So that's it. This is Sacred Heart Catholic Church. This is where all of myself, my siblings, my mother, we were all baptized here. We all attended church here up into our adult lives. When we were little, we came to church every Sunday morning with Mother, and we all insisted on sitting on the front row. Well, you know, we couldn't keep our mouths quiet nor our giggles down, and we would hear, because Mother always wore at that time 3 or 4 inch heels, we could hear those heels clicking down the middle aisle, and she would pick every one of us up and bring us out here and either pop us or have a long talk with us, and no matter whether we were crying, embarrassed, whatever, We'd walk back down to the front and sit down and finish church. And that happened regularly, on a regular basis. You'd think we would learn, but no. The school next to this is the elementary school that I attended. Kindergarten through, my sister says the 8th grade, maybe, I don't know. But before I went to E. Merle Smith Junior High, I was in this parochial school. And if we were really, really good, we got to go to the to the sisters' home, and we got to clean their house for being good. And we thought that was awesome, because that was like going into God's land. You know, no one ever got to go in there. And looking back on it, it's like, oh man, did they play us? But, you know, we had a good time. C.T. Moody and I were in before we moved into this building, we were in a one-room schoolhouse on the other side. And C.T. Moody and I went out after recess. We didn't go back in. We hid behind some bricks because we were just going to take the day off. And of course, they called our mothers, and again, Connie was in trouble. So, you know, the story of my life. So, this is Sacred Heart, and this is where I grew up. This is where I learned my Catholic religion and heritage, and this is where I worshiped God when I was little. I also remember after church every Sunday, everyone would come out here, come out of the church, and just visit before we went home. And when we went home from church, because Mama Two and Papa Pete were always with us, we would go to Mama Two and Papa Pete's house, and she would make pancakes. That was every Sunday event. It's interesting that Mama Two was not Catholic when she met Papa Pete, but converted to Catholicism. And that woman was in this church every single day at 6 o'clock Mass. And when I lived with her, I was with her every single day, 6 o'clock. I slept through most of it because I had to go home and eat breakfast and go to school, but I was with her. So this is where I grew up. One funny story about being over here in the school, my mom would have to bring me to school because we've already been to where we live, so she would drive me to school. And I got out one morning and she said, "Connie, get back in the car." And I said, "What's the matter? I want to go to school." "Get back in the car, Connie." So I got back in the car, and we had to go downtown to a dry goods place because Connie had forgotten to wear her panties to school. And back in the day, little girls didn't wear pants to school, long pants. They had to wear little skirts. So yeah, again, Connie got in trouble. And we used to have our class pictures made here on these steps. And that, where the air conditioner is, that's where the library was. You could go in there and check out books. And at recess time, they sold drinks and candy out of the window. And back in those days, we had glass bottles. And I remember I was drinking a glass Dr. Pepper, and some child out there playing threw the basketball, hit the Coke bottle, and it chipped my tooth. And so that's why I got an implant a couple of years ago. This is the new Sacred Heart Catholic Church. This was built, we'll see on the bookmark or whatever it is up here. This is where I was married to my first husband, Mike Rigotti. This is where my mother had her services when she passed away. And my brother, my uncle. So there's a lot of history in this church also. It's not quite as quaint as the old one, but you know, new things happen. So we're going to walk over here and see if the nameplate is still here, because my sister says that she was sick and couldn't come in her class. You know, so we have to make my sister happy. This is in honor of my sister, Paulette Mayfield. Her class dedicated this church, and she was sick and couldn't be here. So this is going into a time capsule for her, and will be buried in the front flower bed of Sacred Heart Catholic Church, Sinton, Texas.
This is Connie's mother's apartment. Number 313, that area right there.
you look at the stairs, there's a black cat, and those two windows were the Hannah's room, and the other room was the guest bedroom, but she called it the dungeon. So that's where you were sent. But the reason why it was so scary is because the windows would rattle when a train went by, when people walked up the stairs. So it was a pretty scary dungeon.
This is my first apartment after I married Mike Rigotti. We lived here for 3 or 4 months before we moved to Austin so Mike could attend the University of Texas. My father-in-law worked for Piggly Wiggly, and he's a bookkeeper, and any cans that were dented or the labels were off, they could not sell. So he gathered them all up, and that's what we ate when we lived in this apartment. We never knew what we were going to eat, what can we were going to open up, but that was okay because we were newly married and we were in love, and we ate what came out, except for sometimes we opened up cat food, dog food. No, that didn't go. But anyway, we lived here, and there was no air conditioning back in those days, very little. We had one small unit that went in the bedroom, which may be the same one that's up there, and had a small TV and a gas stove, and that's about it. The building across the street, the His and Hers Hair Studio, used to be my Papa Pete Featherling's cleaners and tailors. He was a tailor and he had a cleaning service for clothes. And one night he was there and the Ku Klux Klan came to visit him. And they had their white robes on and their burning torches, and they were yelling at Pete to come out and face his, face them. He stepped out and he knew all of them, and he called one of them out by name and said, "Charlie, what do you think you're doing?" That kind of took all the fire out of their little torches, and so they went home and they never bothered Pete again. But that was his studio. That was his tailor shop. He made suits, tailor-made suits for nearly every man in Sinton, Texas. And then he was the only dry cleaner in Sinton, so he did all the dry cleaning. Standing used to be the Sinton Hotel. It was the only hotel in Sinton, and I think it was about, I don't know, maybe 4 stories high. And not too many years ago, I guess the building just gave way and it crashed. And it crashed down from the second floor fell, and then the top floors fell on top of that. And now they have the restaurant and Subway and so forth.